it became obvious that we could do something quite special.
The ice cream farm became the most visited free-to-enter rural attraction in the UK, welcoming over 830,000 visitors.
We de-merged as a company in 2019. We'd focused on family entertainment and play for so many years that we, to some extent, alienated that customer that got us to where we got to.
So to go from about 70 grand investment, go to where you went to eventually, which I think was about £5 million. It's a bit of a jump there.
But we had 250,000 people through in 6 weeks, which was, in that year, was actually more than Chester Zoo had.
Would you say yours was quite a unique case?
It was the largest unsecured loan that NatWest have ever done in the northwest of England.
Hello and welcome to our next episode of Uncommon Sense. I'm really pleased to say that today we're joined by a brilliant guest, Jonathan Fell. Jonathan is the CEO and owner of the ice cream farm based in Tanton Hall, just outside Chester. Now, anyone who is local to Chester and the northwest of England with young children, like myself, will likely have heard of the ice cream farm. My family have enjoyed some brilliant days out at the ice cream farm over the years. It's a really interesting business, family-owned business, and it's a really interesting story. So Jonathan's going to give us a history of the business, but very briefly, the Fell family started the business, started producing ice cream in 1986, and there was growth in that ice cream business. And then in the late thousands, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Jonathan, but in the late thousands, you built a soft play centre and an ice cream parlour, which then sort of gave you the idea of a full-on adventure park, which is the ice cream farm as we'd know it now. Some great facts: the ice cream farm was listed in the Guinness Book of Records for being home to the largest ice cream shop in the world. And in 2017, the ice cream farm became the most visited free-to-enter rural attraction in the UK, welcoming over 830,000 visitors. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, so everything changed. But it's absolutely brilliant to have you here, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. So if we could get started, welcome to Uncommon Sense.
Thank you.
If you could, I've just given a brief history, but if you'd like to tell us a bit more about the history of business, that would be great.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as you say, it's a family business. We started manufacturing ice cream in 1986, which was a year before I left school. I was never going to be a farmer. My parents were farmers, and it was a diversification project. My father was also outside the box slightly. Back in them days, all farmers sold their milk to the Milk Marketing Board, the MMB. And he realised or discovered that by processing milk on site, he could sell it to an independent dairy. And he was one of only a few farmers in the country that did that the first time. So that sort of opened his eyes to diversification and processing, which got him thinking that, you know, what could he do with the excess milk that he then had, because milk quotas was introduced in the mid-80s as well. So at that time, there wasn't your Ben & Jerry's and your Häagen-Dazs. There wasn't quality ice cream readily available. So there was one farm in the country that was manufacturing ice cream, a chap called Brian Moore up in Yorkshire. So he went up to visit him and just understood the ins and outs of ice cream manufacture. We bought a book on how to make ice cream, right. Which we've still got. And yeah, to this day, the recipe is relatively unchanged from that. We opened to the public when we started making ice cream, initially because we were in quite a touristy area. We were down the road from Beeston Castle, and the Campbell factory was very busy in them days, which was just up the road as well. So yeah, it was really, I guess we were playing at it initially, just to utilise some space in the buildings, open to the public. The product was good, almost from the off, because it was different, it was unique. And I think that just created the interest, and other businesses became interested in that, pubs, restaurants, shops, which then it started to grow the wholesale side of that business. I guess you could say we grew organically through all them early years. We kept on expanding on the farm, on the wholesale side of the business. We got more professional. In the early days, it was an old Bedford Luton van with chest freezers in the back and a generator to deliver ice cream. So both sides of the business grew almost 50-50, you know, as it worked. And then moving forward all the way through them years, I guess there was a turning point, and I always forget the date, probably late 90s, where we got the opportunity to make an organic ice cream for a large supermarket chain, which I probably won't mention.
Okay.
They're quite local. And
there's a good clue there, though.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But it was a funny time, you know. There was everything. There was a big noise about organic produce. It was an organic product for the same price as a normal dairy product,
right.
Which we developed this recipe. We built a new factory. The quantities were huge for what we're going to make. And long story short, the contract lasted 18 months. Right. It should have been a 5-year contract. There were reasons behind that, and you know, not pointing the blame at anybody. So it gave us a real hard-hitting realization that I guess large volume, low margin wasn't the way forward. We had a really good regional product, and we had a lot of people visiting the farm. So it gave us, I guess, the confidence to really look at what we were doing and what was really working. If it hadn't worked, you know, we would have gone on that trajectory, I think, and we would have been, a larger manufacturer, and we'd done a lot of more own label things and what have you. But we stuck to our label, our brand, and moving forward to sort of more recent times, we got to 2013, and on site we were very much at capacity again, year on year. More and more people were coming. We were introducing things. Oh, there's a corner there, we'll stick something there, and it became, I guess, a bit very popular, but I'm not going to say not professional, but we just kept on sticking different things in different areas. There wasn't a plan.
Okay.
So we sat back. We had a few planning issues and giving the council some headaches with traffic and things like that and car parking. So we decided that we needed to have a full master plan. So we managed to take over the whole of the farm site. The farmer that was milking the cows at that time, he upscaled at his other dairy unit, which is just down the road. And we took over the whole farm, and we came up with the master plan for the ice cream farm brand, which is what we are known as today.
It's a really, really interesting story. So just to go back a bit then, the diversification in sort of, which was, 1986, so 37 years ago, it was a long time ago. That was caused almost by necessity, in that you had this excess milk and you thought, what are we going to do with it? Then when you sort of joined the business in the thousands, is that right?
I've always been in the business. Okay. I left school at 16. Okay. My brother went to university, I didn't. So I took the easy option, I suppose you could say. And I've worked in every part of the business. So I started in the manufacturing. And then when the wholesale business side of the business started to grow, I sort of oversaw that. Staffing changes, I went back into the factory for a while, and then the wholesale side of the business grew quite a lot over a period of time. And I just moved from pillar to post a little bit. My mum basically ran everything on the farm. We had an ice cream parlour and a coffee shop, and she just managed all that, worked 7 days a week, fingers to the bone and all that. So it was really more focused on the manufacturing in them early days. And we felt the growth was there. And then obviously, as I say, we just had a bit of a change in direction. And certainly as I grew older, I became more passionate about the leisure side of the business. I could see, a gap in the market, or I just enjoyed it more. I don't know. Yeah, I'd worked in the wholesale side and the logistics side and the manufacturing side for so many years that whether I just wanted to change, I don't know. But at that time, 2008, my brother then joined the business, and he'd always been in manufacturing. He did go to university, cleverer than me, and he took over the manufacturing side and managed the factory, and I sort of oversaw more of the logistics of the wholesale and dabbing my hand more into the leisure side of the business, as my mum just didn't want to do as much as what she was doing. So my parents' lease was coming to an end in 2011, I think, which is when I had to really start thinking what direction we were going to go in.
So I'm interested, as we've been doing these podcasts, there's some common themes that seem to show up a lot. And you've just touched on one there, which is sort of, you said that you weren't the most academic person. And that's interesting because quite a few of the guests we've had on so far have said exactly the same thing. And they're now successful business owners and directors. So from your perspective then, and I suppose this is interesting for anybody who's out there who might be struggling in school or aren't the most academic, did you see that as sort of a benefit that almost helped you going into business or not?
Good question. Having children now and thinking about the schooling and things like that, it makes you think, what did you do and everything. Like I say, in all honesty, I took the easy option. I think, I always had it in my mind, because I wasn't that academic and I didn't have that academic work ethic, I just thought, well, I'm just going to work at home. Now, if my parents didn't start making ice cream, farming, well, I think you're either a farmer or you're not, and I don't think farming was going to be something that I would have done, even if it was the easy option. So I would have had to pull my finger out with something. And to this day, I haven't a clue what I would do. I think I told a teacher in a careers interview that I wanted to manage hotels.
Okay.
Why I said that, I don't know. So I really did, but I guess, this is all that got to give my parents their dues there, really, that, whilst they probably didn't push on the schooling that much because they could maybe see in me that it would be more beneficial for me to get into the workplace.
Yeah.
And, maybe try and calm me down a little bit. I don't know.
And I suppose learn on the job as well.
Yeah, and I think, definitely I had no academic training to run a business. There wasn't even computers then. The lady down the road we took on to do the books, which was the books. It wasn't a computer. Yeah. She didn't know how to turn a computer on. So, we all learned together. My dad, the most qualified, because he understood about running a business because he'd run a farm business for years. So following his lead and all learning as we went, really, and improving and training within the business. There could have been more of an academic viewpoint of, when I got to a certain age, I could have gone more down more of a training route. I've got friends that have gone off to college, 30 years old, to
MBAs
and things like that. Yeah. But again, I don't have that mindset, and I think, thankfully, it put me in good stead, I think.
Yeah. Really interesting. There was another part of your story which I thought was interesting, talking about how you built not the ice cream, but the factory on the side to build the ice cream when you got the contract. That's an interesting learning, I'm sure, not just for your business, but I'm sure for other businesses that are out there. That, I suppose, must have been quite a big investment for you to build that factory. What would you say were the main things that you learned from sort of that? I know you don't want to dwell on the...
No, well, I have to be honest. I was very much an employee day to day, working in the factory, I think, around them times. We had a production manager, so I wasn't even, at a managerial level. I was just literally, one of the guys in the factory making the ice cream. Right. Whilst I had responsibilities because I was a member of the family, I wasn't qualified to be a production manager. you know, so I was learning within that, and I was quite happy being at that level. So at that time, it was very much, you know, my father that was doing that. He won that contract. He was very much at the forefront of the business in them days, and he was the one that, you know, negotiated it. We did have a sales manager who was obviously working on that side of the business as well, but it was very much my dad's thing.
Right.
And he certainly did nothing wrong. You know, it was just the way things happened. You know, and it wasn't. It was a good product. It was just basically a fact that this supermarket decided, right, we're not going to buy that product anymore. Along with about 18 others, I think.
Okay.
You know, they had a bit of a shift.
Right.
In what they were doing. So. Yeah, it was a lesson learned.
I find it really interesting. I find it interesting how, you know, when people run businesses, you might have an idea in your head of where you think it's going to go and the progression. And I suppose what your business has shown over the years to where it is now is that nothing's linear, and that the life cycle, or the life journey of a business, if you want to call it that, it can just change, and you have to be willing to move and adapt. And that ultimately. That's what you did, and that's what you guys did. So moving forward, then, funny little fact, and you know this already, Jonathan, was that in the thousands, my wife was one of the employees at the ice cream farm. So we've got a personal connection to that. It was her first job ever, I think. Then I remember in 2008 or around that time, you built a soft play centre. Was that the first time where you thought, hang on, we're onto something here?
Yes and no, yes. I think we were becoming to realise, because of the wholesale side of the business, and what had happened on the manufacturing side and where we were selling the ice cream, where we were selling the most ice cream was in the leisure sector. You know, we were supplying Chester Zoo. You know, they had loads. You know, they were our biggest customer, and to some extent still are. They're up there somewhere. So I guess the mindset was more, where is our marketplace? You know, we were very much focused on food service, hotels and restaurants. But any leisure attractions that we supplied, which were very few, they were right up there. You know, they were selling so much in comparison.
Right.
And we had a leisure attraction of sorts.
Yep.
You know, so it was very much, well, how can we add value to this then? You know, create our own marketplace, which is a term that I use quite a lot, which is probably why I started thinking about that. Now, soft play was relatively new. I mean, it's been going for decades now, but it was actually talked about much earlier in some of the vacant building space that we had. And for whatever reason, we didn't do that because the focus was on manufacturing. But then, we came to that lull, if you like, of right, where we're going now. Everything was running smoothly. And it was, but I think the catalyst was really when we started expanding on more play attractions outside of that. So that was the first thing, definitely. And then we looked at what else we could do.
So you sort of proved the concept, I suppose, before you went ahead for the big expansion.
Proving the concept came later. The soft play was a very profitable add-on.
Okay.
You know, paid for itself very quickly. But then when we developed an outside area in 2010, I think, where we were, I'd like to say that it was all planned, but we just went out and looked at what things might complement what we were doing. So I bought a 12-hole mini golf course for 20 grand. We tarmacked an area and we got some coin-operated quad bikes, and we had a general play area, very off-the-shelf thing that we put in. I think the investment totaled about 70 grand for that area, and it paid for itself in 3 months.
Okay.
So I think that was really the time, and this is when things started moving quite quickly, because that really had an impact on footfall as well. So I thought, right, we're onto something.
Yeah.
And that was really coming to the time when what was the future of the whole farm? And this is when, we had discussions with the farmer who was milking the cows because, we stopped farming, late 90s. So, but it was always the milk that was produced on the farm that we still used for the ice cream, and somebody else just ran that business.
Okay.
Just so happened he was next door, and it made no sense for him to milk cows at 2 sites. So that's why we looked at the master plan.
It's really interesting. And then in 2013, I think you said, was when you first sort of looked at the big plan. Would you call yourself a visionary? What was it that sort of made you think this is what we're going to do? I mean, you've said that you sort of proved the concept with what you already had, if you like. But to go from that, right, let's put it into context. So to go from about 70 grand investment into in those things that you've just outlined, to go to where you went to eventually, which I think was about £5 million, I think you've said, roughly. There's a bit of a jump there. So what was the thought behind that, and how did you go about that?
Was I a visionary? I think going back to this creating your own marketplace, I think, to build it, they will come, I think is the other thing that springs to mind. And you always think, right, well, how far can we go with this? And, I got talking to a company called Rural Solutions, who were really, they're essentially planning consultants. And because we knew them quite well and they did work for our landlord, I could just sit down with them and say, look, we've got an opportunity here to expand and do something on this site. And he gave me some really good advice in terms of your footfall's everything. Look at what footfall you've got. You've got 350,000 people coming, which is significant.
Wow.
And I didn't realise that. So that's what you've got to build on. If you've got them coming, they start spending more money. You do.
And this was before the big investment.
This was way before.
Wow.
So it was more. That is quite a lot. And I started looking at other visitor attractions, what footfall they got. I thought, there is a lot coming. So the business plan was there one? I don't know. Was very much. I'm sitting down with the bank manager and say, look, we've got an opportunity to expand. We're a free-to-enter attraction. There's 350,000 people coming. Worst case scenario is we start charging them to come. And that was about as far as the business plan went. I remember the conversation because he was a friend before he was a bank manager, and he said, well, what sort of money are you talking? And I said, well, I think we can build something around about £1 million. And then when we started looking into it and, working with architects and doing the planning side of things, I would have bought Disneyland if I could.
Okay.
So, I think it was more at that stage. I thought when you started looking realistically at what you were going to build, it became obvious that we could do something quite special, which is then when I started pushing for more funding. Which then where the work came into, you had to justify, what you were doing. But essentially, whilst everybody looks at it now, you think it's a completely different thing than what it was. Everything we did was just an expansion on what we were already doing. We built an attraction called Silver Cone. It's coin-operated quad bikes. We were already doing that. We built an adventure golf course. We already had a mini golf course. It was just a bigger and better one. And the model was the same. Now, when we got to the point of how you're going to get that return on the money, which is when the strategy of what that business model should be, is when that came in, really.
Okay. So for business people out there who are looking at raising funds, would you say yours was quite a unique case, or what were your experiences of trying to raise the funds?
Very challenging because we don't own the site, so we've got no security. Right. It's actually, and I think they like to shout about this a little bit. It was the largest unsecured loan that NatWest have ever done in the northwest of England.
Wow.
Which I think is, whether they do something like that now, I doubt very much. But it was the strength of the cash flow. Our overheads were so low. It was essentially a diversified farm. We had 2 people in the office, a handful of staff, and we had 350,000 people coming.
Yeah.
So it was a very strong business financially, because the overheads were so low, because the income was good. But then there's, in hindsight now looking back, it was so good then. Our overheads now are through the roof on top of the funding and everything else. So to look back at how strong it was then, and then, you look at your growth pattern and what you're going to do, I wouldn't change it, but I might have approached it with a bit more caution.
This is really interesting. And again, it's another common theme that we hear in these podcasts, which is this idea of, I might have done things a bit differently if I'd known. I think it was Jen on one of our previous podcasts that sort of said that she thought naivety was a superpower. If she'd known what she was really getting herself into, she wouldn't have probably been as gung-ho, I suppose, the phrase you use. Is that the case for you, would you say, with this or with everything? I mean, just interesting.
Yeah, I think COVID's changed a lot of people. Certainly changed me, but up until COVID, I think I had and I use this term quite a lot, a naive assumption that everything will work. And, we have been through things that haven't worked. I got asked a question a while ago, what's one of the failures? And, I bought 600,000 donuts from America and sold half of them, lost a fortune.
Okay.
Because I just thought it was a hot donut solution that didn't work. And, and I think there was that naivety. I think you just go for it, and you back of a fag packet. Yeah, that works. I've only got to sell so many to get my money back. And and I think you do feel a bit untouchable. But as I say, I think when COVID, it makes you realise that none of us are, and I am much more cautious now. But I was very, some people say fearless. I don't like the term, but it was very much like gung ho. Yeah, let's crack on. If they're going to give us that money, let's build it.
Well, yeah, and I suppose from listening to you, I think the thing that strikes me is rather than fearless, I suppose it's also you didn't allow yourself to overthink it. And I think often in business that's what stops people from making decisions is they go through every single scenario and they go through every single contingency and what if this happens, and then nothing ends up getting done. And it strikes me that's why I think they call it a superpower. It's because you are an example of someone who didn't overthink it, didn't allow yourself to think of all the negative things that might happen, and just went ahead and did it.
Yeah, I think not that you don't think about it. It's you brush over. Well, right, what's worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that can happen? And in my mind was, we'll just start charging.
Okay.
Which the worst thing that could happen happened in COVID.
Yeah.
So that was always the backup plan, which seemed to pacify the bank. They looked at the numbers, and that gave me confidence in a way. I thought, well, if they're gonna throw that sort of money at me, then if they're confident about it, then I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said it was the largest unsecured loan, but in a sense, with your cash flow and with the visitors that you had, it was almost secured in that sense.
Yeah, I hate the term because they still say unsecured now, and what it is, because you take our business if we can't pay you back.
Yeah.
So,
good point.
We might not own the land, but from our side of things, we lose a lot if we can't service the loan, of which it hasn't really disappeared, because every year there was more and more things that so many people came that, oh God, we have to do this, we've got to build another car park, we've got to put a pedestrian crossing in. Every year there was something, and we just didn't get the ahead of the game to start repaying that debt. And then of course, we get to COVID and we're back to square one to some extent.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And just to go back before the COVID hit, so once you'd done the redevelopment, and I remember it, as I say, quite vividly, because I had young children at exactly that stage where it opened again, if you like. That was an amazing development. And then, I mean, in the nicest possible way, I suppose, in terms of visitor numbers, all hell broke loose for your business, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because it suddenly went from, even a decent footfall of 300k or whatever it was to suddenly almost trebling that pretty much overnight. Would that be fair?
Pretty much. We did. It justified why we were doing what we were doing because of the interest and what we'd done in 2013. So then, a couple of years leading up to 2015, which is when we did the redevelopment, the footfall grew further, and we got up to 500,000 by the time we were putting a spade in the ground.
Okay.
So again, that gave us more confidence, and showing that there was a demand for what we were doing. So because we weren't changing, as I said before, really what we were doing, we were just doing it bigger and better, and the visual impact was huge. People really weren't expecting for it to look like it looked.
No.
And I think I've forgotten the question.
So I guess my question is it suddenly grew to over 800,000 visitors. How did you deal with that? Did that take you by surprise?
That comes back to naivety.
Yeah.
We had the same team, really, the same people in the same place, because we were essentially, as I keep on saying, doing the same thing. I didn't go for a new management team or look for any help with that apart from who was already doing it. Because I thought, well, they're best qualified because they know how to scoop ice cream, they know how to run a play attraction. But it was such a jump that, we got through that first summer, which was operationally horrendous. But God, sat down and I had all the sort of the main managers sat down crying their eyes out saying, how are we going to do this? This just doesn't work. We had 250,000 people through in 6 weeks in that first summer holidays, which was, in that year, was actually more than Chester Zoo had.
Wow.
Same summer holidays, and we're 20th of the size.
Yep.
So it was wrong, customers, every complaint that we had was it's just too busy. I think people, because of what we'd built, recognised why there was the interest. So we were forgiven to some extent, but we had to very quickly get better.
Yeah. But also it was free to enter. And I think, do you think that gave you some leeway in a sense, or do you think that almost created part of the problem?
It did, and I really dug my heels in with the free to enter thing. The immediate thing to do, or could have been, was to charge, and control the footfall that way and make it more manageable.
Yeah.
But it's what made us different, and it's why we'd got to where we were. When you started in the so-called recession in 2000, that was 2008, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember farm businesses, open farms and things ringing me up saying, oh God, we're having to charge more because the footfall's dropped, and it was a slippery slope. Whereas our footfall went through the roof because we were so good value for money. So things like that I remembered. I thought, well, no, I'm not changing something that works. We just need to adapt and be able to accommodate these people and try and spread out that footfall throughout the year, which is still a challenge. So we stuck with it, and it worked, and the mechanics of the business were such that we introduced new things. The VIP play pass was something which was crucial to try and increase that footfall and revenue in the winter, because we did a sale, a half price sale of which was a ridiculously discounted thing.
I know, I got one, thanks.
And some a lot of people still have. But that, with all the pressures that we're under now, sadly that just doesn't, we can't continue with that. Whilst we still honour them. We wouldn't be here next year if we'd have carried on down that way.
So that's really interesting. So you were quite honest just then about how you got your management team around and thought, right, we need to maybe look at getting some new people in or changing the way we operate. Could you talk to me a bit more about that? So what did you do? Did you step back? How was that?
No, I didn't step back. No. First things first, I had to find a manager, a general manager that could oversee everything, or help me oversee. I was still naively thinking I could do it. And again, hindsight now, looking back, it was the best thing I ever did. And Katie, who is my now managing director, who was taken on in that second year for general manager. I think we're going to talk about family businesses. I wasn't very professional or corporate. My interviewing skills leave a lot to be desired, and she still jokes about that now. But she was, from my mind, I went with my gut. She was a mum. She was a customer, and she had an experience of managing a lot of people. So it was a godsend, to do that. And then that really helped me help her structure the whole business better and manage the whole thing much better.
Right. And then we'll come on to the C word, COVID. So things were looking good, and footfall was good, as you say, challenges, but looking good. And then all of a sudden, 2019 happens, pandemic, or 2020, 2019, 20. And you're in hospitality and leisure, if you like. What did you do? I mean, I know you made some big changes. I'd be really interested to understand what happened. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, well, firstly, to add to the, I wouldn't say add to the pressure, actually. I don't know, it was probably a good thing that we did this. But we demerged as a company in 2019 because I was very much focused on the leisure side of the business, and my brother was very much focused on manufacturing. We decided as a family, so let's do. We still work on share the offices. It's still, for all intents and purposes, it still runs the same, but on paper at least it's split. Because my parents were getting to an age where we wanted some security for them because of the debt on the leisure side of the business. It was impacting a side of the business that was very different. That was a good, secure business that we thought, well, actually, let's just de-risk that side. So we did that for all the reasons I mentioned, and then obviously COVID hit. So there was some mechanics involved in doing that, because in terms of the funding and everything, the leisure side of the business had to have a certain performance to be able to service that debt on its own without having the other side of the business. So there was again, I guess another exercise with the bank there to convince them that we can stand on our own 2 feet. Yeah. Literally months before COVID. Yeah. Which there was an element of risk with that, because there was always a safety net there with, the business was twice as big together. So then COVID did hit, and at the time where we call it our pinch point, the end of March, where literally we run out of money. We make the money in the summer, it slowly dwindles away through the winter, or quickly. And then at the end of March is really when, we're desperately waiting for Easter to come. So we were out of money. COVID hit, and literally I think we were one of the first ones to get a CBILS loan. Okay. And we had to somehow finger in the air and say, well, how much do we need? So I think we made a uncalculated guess of well, maybe we need it just to get through the end of the summer holidays. Let's assume that we're going to have to be closed all summer holidays, and nobody knew, did they?
No, nobody knew.
And as it turned out, we weren't far off, and that amount was about the right amount. But yeah, it was a scary time.
Yeah, sure. And so you did make some changes in the, I remember coming to the ice cream farm during lockdown to your drive. I was going to say drive-through, but that would be completely wrong, wouldn't it? The drive-in, is that right?
It was a drive-through. So in COVID, much like other hospitality businesses, we were given that time to think, right, once we knew this was going to be a bit of a longer-term thing, we thought, right, what's the plan? How are we going to come out of this with the increased debt that we're taking on board? Trying to, you wouldn't know that what was going to happen further, the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine and everything else. And the way our target audience, how them trends might change and what that demand, what might happen to the demand. So we weren't to know that either. But we decided, well, now's the time we're going to have to look at this business model and work out how we can stay true to our ethos of it's up to the customer how much they spend, and everything that's made us popular.
Yeah.
But we've got to get more revenue. It's as simple as that, because our overheads have gone up, everything's going up. That model just simply didn't work anymore. The risk being what happens to the footfall once you change.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to get that balance right. So in simple terms, we introduced as minimal entrance fee as possible and kept the business model mainly the same, that once they're through the door, it's up to them how much they spend. Now, my issue with that was, how can we service the ice cream only customer? Because that's where we came from. We were a farm that sold ice cream, and people would just call in who enjoyed ice cream, and the product is a very good product. We can't charge somebody to come in to somewhere to then buy ice cream. Yeah. So, as you say, we did a drive-through in lockdown, which was a contactless way of it didn't keep the wheels turning. It was a token effort, but it was very, very popular because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, that's right.
So I thought, we started looking at that, and we thought, well, a drive-through isn't really very practical. Driving and eating ice cream is not the cleverest thing to do. No. And we had some space on the perimeter of the site. By moving the animals to one side, we could utilise an area. And my view was, let's go back to that, creating our own marketplace and create a nice environment where people can enjoy our product. It's really going back to basics, which is when we came up with the idea of the drive-in, the ice cream drive-in. And when I started doing my so-called market research, in other words, Googling, it became obvious that there wasn't another ice cream drive-in anywhere in the world. The domain was available, and I thought there was a real, and we like to try and find something that's either the biggest in the world or something like that. And we thought, there's the real chance here to look at what we could do. So we did just that. We used the technology that everybody was getting used to with the QR code ordering, so they can now drive into an area, a nicely landscaped area. They can order their ice cream via a QR code, and we deliver that ice cream to them via a converted golf buggy. So they can drive in, park up, chill out is the term. But they can also cycle in, walk in. It's a way of selling our ice cream alongside, because we realised that we did have two customers. We'd focused on family entertainment and play for so many years that we, to some extent, alienated that customer that got us to where we got to. So it was a way of trying to bring that back. And it's working this year. We're 50% up on last year in the drive-in, and we really hope that we can target a bit of a separate demographic with that.
It's so much good stuff come out of that. I think, I've used the drive-in, as I said, myself with the family. Ollie, the producer's here nodding his head. It's a really, really good idea. There's several things that come out of that. The first would be, it seems interesting to me that everyone, COVID was obviously catastrophic for a lot of businesses, and it was a case of how we're going to get through. And as you say, no one could have foreseen what was going to happen, right? But in a positive sort of way for you and the ice cream farm, it strikes me that you used that time to almost rethink and, I wouldn't say start again, but to really focus, I suppose, on what do we want to be, where are we going to go. Would you say that you almost turned a negative into a positive, or as a turning point?
I have used that term a bit. I did through lockdown, and I'm not great at presentations or PowerPoints or anything like that, but I spent a long time just trying to empty my head and getting it down on paper, so to speak. And it really was a proposal to the rest of the management team saying, right, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And it did. It gave, and I've heard many hospitality business owners say the same thing, that it gave you that time to analyse your business. And we were rabbit in the headlights to some extent, even after the opening in 2015, how crazy it was. Every year was it was just calming down. We got all the food back in-house because the main restaurant was actually rented out to a separate company, but and that was going to help, and then of course that happened. So I certainly do think we turned a negative into a positive. That's not to say that it's not challenging. It's very challenging, and it is almost like starting a new business. The great advantage we've got is our demographic is forever evolving. So the kids that enjoy the ice cream farm and what we offer are, 2 to 7. Once they get older than 7, they're a bit bored with what we do. And so there's always, we're 4 years on now. So how many families have had kids in them 4 years? They're all new customers coming through.
Yeah.
So any customers that weren't particularly happy with the change, I had to grow a thick skin with that, because it was such a good value for money, and it wasn't as much now. But then we adapted in a way that we can really start remarketing ourselves to that new customer and people that hadn't been before. This is what it is now. What do you think? And the feedback we're getting is fantastic. The only negative ones are potentially about the people that got the VIP play pack. Which it was so cheap, and I don't regret that, because it really got us to where we got to, but it just doesn't work anymore.
So that's really interesting. And the thing that strikes me in through everything you've said is you really do understand your customers. You might not notice it, but you say it a lot, and I think it helps. Obviously, you've got children of a similar age as well, so that helps.
Yeah, I didn't when we built the ice cream.
You didn't know? No, that's true.
My wife came out of hospital with our first the day before we opened.
Okay. But you really, it strikes me that you really do understand your market, and you understand who your customers are, and that when you built the drive-in, you were saying we went back to our roots of those people that just wanted the ice cream, but then equally, you've got those customers who are using the ice cream farm for the attraction and as a day out, and then you had to make those changes. Did you find that those? So you know your customers. Did you, when you made that choice to change the model slightly to start charging? How? I mean, you've said that it's been quite successful, and you've had a bit of pushback from a couple of people, but how was that whole process of changing the model? How did you go about it internally, and did you have reservations or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would have, if we hadn't have come up with the drive-in concept, I would have been a lot more worried. But in my mind, and we've always had this philosophy of never charge for what was always been free, which is difficult to justify with what we've done. But in my simple mind, we still were providing a place for people to come in the countryside to enjoy our product. There was investment into that. It is a unique operation. The animals was always a pull. We were always known as a farm. There was animals. It was a token effort. We've always had animals on farm that were free to view, and we moved them next to the free to enter part of the site. So going right back to the beginning of what we were, that's essentially what it was.
Okay.
Albeit using modern technology to do it in a slightly different way. The downside of doing an open air ice cream parlour, if you like, is you can't view the product. It is all on your phone and things. So that's a bit challenging, but I can't wave a magic wand. We couldn't have really just built another ice cream parlour. So we're confident about it, and I think talking to people that have been, we're getting really good feedback. In the early days, the technology wasn't good. It wasn't slick. It was an off-the-shelf app, with QR code ordering app that was wanting your date of birth, and it'd send you a code, and then you had to activate that before you could even order anything. So it was really clunky. So we invested in designing our own app, which is as slick as it can be when you're ordering, 40 different flavours of ice cream and what might go on them. So We think we've got that right. We've had some challenges on them really busy days, because that's the other risk. You've got no control, as we didn't before.
Right.
On a bank holiday Monday, what if thousands and thousands of people come and they all want to order ice cream? You know, so
I suppose it's a nice problem to have, though.
yeah, it is. It is, and there's contingency for that, obviously. But yeah, no, we certainly, going back to your original point, was, you know, turning the negative into a positive. I think we've refreshed everything, but with that comes the communication of what you've done, and you really got to get that message out there. People knew what the ice cream farm was, and it was the ease of just just go to the ice cream farm. Yeah. There's more to it now. You know, there's a booking system and there's things around. So we've got to really stay true to what we know got us to where we've got to, but also you've got to move with the times and adapt.
Totally. It's been a really, really interesting discussion about the ice cream farm. I'd like to come on to a bit then about sort of business in general, if you like, and your experiences. Because obviously you run a family business, and as you say, your parents set up, you know, the original business in the 80s. You and your brother now run the two separate bits, but you know, the business, if you like. For anyone who's out there that's running a family business, I suppose what I'm interested to know is what have been the challenges you've found, or have you not seen it as a challenge? Have you seen it as a benefit or positive?
I wouldn't say that the family business thing has been a challenge, because I think we're very lucky that generally we get on. Me and my brother are very chalk and cheese.
Okay.
And we do look at things differently, which is the reasoning behind probably why we demerged, and we had the grown-up conversation saying, well, hold on a minute, you know, we do look at things differently. You know, you're passionate about making ice cream, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm passionate about selling it and everything else that goes with it. So I think looking long-term and into the future, we're quite good at talking. I guess the downside of a family business is, certainly our family, is that it's not very corporate, and you don't run a business in a way as professionally as some might say. You know, our board meetings are in the kitchen over a brew, you know. So, and as my parents got older and did less and less within the business, I guess the challenge and the concern is, you know, am I doing it right? I suppose, and you know, am I doing what? And there's always that. You know, certainly in farming, I know that, you know, there's the huge challenge of that succession of taking over the family business, and are you doing it in the way that your father would have done, or your mum would have done? So, but my parents have been very good at releasing that control and trusting me to some extent. Not to say that they probably had their concerns in the early days, which is why they were still at the helm up to a certain point. But I guess once they saw and they had the confidence in me to not mess the whole thing up, then it gradually went that way. So I think we've been very lucky in terms of our family makeup.
Did you feel any pressure then, so inheriting the business, if you like, or becoming a senior person in the business? Did you feel that you had to prove yourself more to, I don't know, people that were coming to work for you? Did you find that extra pressure because of that, do you think?
Not so much, because I did work in the business,
right.
You know, and I think, you know, only up until recently, really, you know, when it was still all one business, I was still trying to oversee both sides of the business, but I was still in at 6, sorting out all the deliveries for that day, get that out of the way first, and until we could get, you know, a really good team to manage that. So for me, my personal struggle is really being able to take that step to, you know, to use the old term, you know, work on your business or in your business.
Yep.
And I think that's a challenge when you're in a family business. It always got to be a member of the family on site, you know, and then when you get to a certain size where you just grind yourself into a hole if that's the case, you know, and you've got no life. If you're there 7 days a week, I didn't want to be there 7 days a week. And, you know, therefore the business has got to get to a certain size to be able to manage itself, you know, and have the right people in place to do that.
No, it's really very interesting, because that is one of the number one things that we get told, you know, by clients all the time is, you know, how do I, especially at a smaller business size, you know, which is the industries we're in, sort of SME type businesses, is I just don't have the time to work on the business and not in the business, as you said. So what have you done then at the ice cream farm, or for yourself, to give yourself that sort of time and space to work on the business and not in it, as you said?
It's all about, it was a cliche, but it's all about surrounding you with people that can do the job better than you, you know, and I know I've heard that so many times, but it is so true. And I think it's taken a long time to get there, but, you know, I don't want to go on about, you know, how great Katie is, what I took on, but she really was, you know, she instigated that and made me say, well, actually, I can get people around me that can do this better. Not that I don't have an involvement, but, you know, even to the point of marketing now, for the first time ever, the other day, I sat in a meeting and it wasn't me pushing for a campaign or pushing for doing something. You know, it got presented to us as a management team, which was refreshing. And it was good. You know, it wasn't me thinking, I wouldn't do it like that. So it's all about the people. And I think if to this day there isn't, the culture's got to be a thing. I mean, we haven't touched on branding, which I'm very passionate about. And I think if you can instill them values and the culture of how I want the business to be run, then I think, you know, a purpose-led business really helps with making sure that I am comfortable stepping back, because there's a framework there to work to, and that's really important.
I love this. Right, so this is right up my street. So let's talk about branding, as you mentioned. And
God, how long have you got?
Yes, yeah, we could go on forever about this, for sure. But you know, I love what you just said, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that. So obviously, the ice cream farm, you know, it has got the brand and all of that stuff. But I'm really interested what you just said about purpose and culture and values and behaviours. It's an important part of what we do. It's an important part behind our brand at the Uncommon Practice. I'm interested to understand at the ice cream farm then, you know, how have you instilled, what have you done in terms of values, behaviours, culture? Well,
it's been a learning curve for me. I think my first experience with branding was when we looked at Cheshire Farm ice cream, the product, and what was known locally as the ice cream farm, you know, what we were going to call this new visitor attraction in 2015. And it was known locally as the ice cream farm. And we went through a process with the team I was working with then on the mainly graphic design. Let's face it, there wasn't a branding strategy as much then that you would go through, but we did to some extent go through that, which I began to understand how a branding strategy works. It's not all about your logo. And so what is the ice cream farm, and does ice cream grow on trees? And that was where that came from. But I learned more and more about the internal branding and culture and how that can align to your visual brand and your customer experience and your employee experience, how that can be aligned. And it all started to make sense. I thought, I get it. So that's why we should market things in that way, and because it aligns to that, and it all sort of glued together. And yeah, I bore mine.
No, I mean, this is right up my street, if I'm honest with you. But it's really interesting because, you know, there's the old phrase about what's a brand, and the one I use, you know, I work in marketing, and the one I use is, you know, it's the stories that people tell about your business where, you know, when you're not there, which is a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think for a business like yours, where, you know, we're in B2B business, but you're obviously in the, you know, hospitality sector, you've got 800,000 people who are going to come to visit you, who are all going to go away telling their stories about what it means and what the ice cream farm is. And I guess I'm leading you into an answer here, which I'm not meaning to do that, but I'm guessing that that's the reason why when you were talking about your people, because at the end of the day, the service that they give and the way that everything looks, the way they are with customers, is going to influence all of those stories that they tell when they go home. Would that align with your thinking?
Absolutely. And again, it was, I think I used the word too much, but it was a realization and a light bulb moment. Like I say, it all clicked. I got to understand. I think for me, we talked about purpose and I'm not great at reading books. I don't read a lot of books and things. But when I started getting more and more interested in branding, and when we went through these different processes of, from the ice cream farm, and then we developed a brand called Sticky Paws, which was the family restaurant concept. And then we developed the drive-in. I started, three or four times, I've paid consultants to take me through a bit of a journey of how we come up with the brand and go through that strategy first. But then I thought, surely I can do this myself, because to some extent I understood it. And I think, going back to into COVID, I thought, I've got loads of time on my hands. I actually, for the first time ever, enrolled on a course, a branding strategy course, because from what I was reading, it was very conflicting. What is branding? And everybody had a different sentence or something about it. And there was a very good online video tutorial course, which was one way of thinking about it, which generally followed the same principles of branding. And it made me look at a TED talk by Simon Sinek, who I'm sure
Start with Why.
Start with Why. And that was the real light bulb moment. And I, he's an American writer that, is very, very good at talking in public, and you're enthralled with what he's saying. But it just, that really does make sense. And then, the more I looked into it, the more I learned about our business and how we could relate our business to that start with why. Why are we here? Beyond making money, what's it all about? And what do we do for our customers? What do we really do for our customers? And then we did a few surveys and got some feedback from that. And this bringing me just to this, latest marketing proposal that we did. All that work that we did in lockdown, because I took that to the management team and I thought, I need to get buy-in with this. I don't want to just stand there and rabbit on about culture, purpose, values. And we went through these workshops, and everybody, to some extent, got passionate about it with me. And I think it's fantastic. And you can't. I think for us, it keeps that passion, and it gives you purpose for why you're doing it, and you can always come back to, what should we do? Practically, you can look at a business strategy and say, what we're going to do in this area, and we've got a strap line for Sticky Paws, eating with kids made easy. And every decision we look at in Sticky Paws, we come back to, does it make it easy for the customer? Does it make it easy, not just for the customer, for the staff? And that's what we come back to, and it's keeping coming back to them really key purposes that we look at.
So what is this? The two questions I've got off the back of that. One would be, what is your why? Are you able to share that with us? Was that confidential information?
No, it's funny. We're not going to, when you look into how you should define your purpose, or when I did in the course that I did, we're not saving the world, so, there's Tom's shoes. For every pair of shoes they sell, they give a pair to somebody that needs them, things like that. We just can't do that. So we had to look wider about what the ice cream farm's all about, and essentially, and it's a bit Disney, but there's no getting away from it. We want to make people happy. That's what ice cream's a happy product. Putting play next to it and family entertainment is you're creating memories, you're doing all these things. So our purpose, and it's changed a bit over the last few years, but to inspire and preserve happiness. So it's very wide and all encompassing, but you can really break that down individually into your behaviours and your values, and it gives you an awful lot to go at for a wider strategy.
I love it. I think it's really interesting. The thing you touched on is about everyone thinks that branding is to affect your customers, but what strikes me as well, and we're big on this here as well, is that it also feeds through to your employees, right? So your purpose makes it almost quite clear. You almost self-select the sort of people that should come and work for you and that you want on your team. Have you found that?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're getting much better at when we're talking about anything to do with our inductions or anything like that. It's that alignment of what we're doing for our customers, we should be doing for our teams. And it's as much like, because we employ so many younger people, we've gone back to sort of more under 16s because we're really struggling to get enough. But what we're doing for a 14 and 15-year-old, their first job, like your wife is their first job. And we take that really, really seriously now. And it gives us that framework to give it kudos, if you like. Yeah. When we're talking to these younger kids, and it might be their first job, it's their first experience dealing with the public, which can be challenging. But to really try and help them understand this is what we're all about. Without getting too gushy and too Disney, it's got to be authentic, which is what I keep on coming back to. You've got to be honest about it. And if it's not authentic, then it just gets washed over. So
yeah, well, this is really interesting. One final question on this point, which is, you might not have realised this, but when you were talking about purpose and all that stuff, you sort of raised your eyebrows a bit. And I think there's a reason for that. And in my experience, and we talked to quite a lot of business owners, particularly sort of more traditional, thinking sort of farming, but traditional businesses, there's a lot of people who are skeptical about this whole idea of purpose, values, behaviours. Whatever, I don't need any of that. We do this business or whatever. And I'm guessing you came from quite a traditional sort of, if you like, background and business. What would you say to those people who are perhaps a bit more skeptical about this side of things? Clearly you've embraced it, but what would you say to them? I
totally get it. Yeah, I can see why you would look at a purpose and say, it doesn't relate to us, But what I would say is, if you go through a process of working out what your purpose is, as much as you might sort of cringe and, but ask yourself them key questions, what are we doing for our customer? Remove the commercial money making side of it. Just do that exercise. If even if it's a consultant or somebody that you do have to pay a bit of money. It's really worthwhile asking yourself them questions. And actually, just for fun, maybe not fun, but just for the sake of it, go through that process. Ask yourself them. We've got 12 questions that we ask ourselves of how we could get to a purpose statement. Let's ask ourselves these questions and see what we can come up with. And we came up with loads. It just prompts them conversations, and it gives your team, and every business is different, but within reason, it gives them teams to pun, it gives them purpose because it makes sense. Whether they use it, to the extent that we're trying to use it, I guess it depends on the type of business and who's running it, but it's a worthwhile exercise. I think is the best I could say.
That's such a brilliant answer and a really great conversation. I hope people got a lot from that. I'd like to sort of, this final part of this conversation, talk a bit more about you as a leader, if you don't mind. And I don't know if that makes you feel uncomfortable or not, but that's why you're here. And whether you like it or not, you are a leader of a very successful business. And so what I'm interested to understand then is something, as I told you, we've had some common themes throughout these podcasts. And one of them that we've heard a lot is this idea of imposter syndrome. Is that something that you felt yourself or have felt in your business career?
Yeah, constantly. I think, I don't know if all business leaders feel that. I think my journey, if you like, from a family business and worked throughout the business and gone through what we've gone through, I guess it becomes natural to sort of do that, but you do wonder, how did I get here? Really, it can't really have been me. And that's why, and it wouldn't have been me without the teams around you. You can't do it yourself. So absolutely, I think it's hard to define, imposter syndrome, because
it's a feeling almost.
It's an awkward feeling that you think, from people looking in, you might think that way, but it is just me, and
So the next follow-up question to that then is, how have you overcome that then, would you say?
God, that is a good question.
So for anyone out there who's a young leader, or maybe not young, anyone who's a leader who thinks, I can't believe people are following me, and how have I ended up in this position, if you like?
I don't know whether it's something you should overcome, I guess is what I would say, because, I think that could go too far the other way. So I think it's quite a nice way to be. So,
well, that's
the answer.
That's a brilliant answer. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I absolutely love that. That's brilliant. So I suppose one of my questions on leadership for you would be, have you looked up to any leaders, would you say, in your career? Is there anyone that you've followed? Obviously, your parents were probably quite important to you.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that can start something from scratch, which my parents did, and I never forget the fact that, I had a fantastic head start, so that's what makes me feel awkward about, conversations like this, about being a leader and things, where actually, I got handed something that had huge potential and was already successful, so I think, in terms of who I look up to, anybody that has actually done that and gone right through. I listen to that Diary of a CEO things every now and again. And I can't remember the guy's name that started Brewdog.
Oh, I can't remember his name, sorry.
Yeah, Matt something. Well, there's two of them, wasn't there? But and just to hear a story like that he started brewing beer in his garage, and he was going to be a fisherman because his dad was a fisherman, and it's amazing, and to be able to grow something. I mean, that's an example that's huge, but anybody that really can start something from scratch, I think, is because I didn't.
Okay.
And I think, that's who I admire, because I don't know whether I could. I've started new things within the business, and you makes you realise how challenging that is. So I think, to succeed that way and take it right through is probably the best answer I've got.
No, that's a great answer. I've got two final questions, and the first one, and I just want to touch on this because I think it's relevant to a lot of people, and I know that you mentioned earlier that you've got a younger family. I do too, so with similar sorts of ideas, I suppose. What I'm interested in is, your name is literally above the door. Not literally, but the Fell name, it's your business and it's a family business. How have you been able to maintain, have you always been able to maintain a good work-life balance? Is it something that's got more important to you over the years? I'm interested to understand that.
Yes, it's certainly got more important to me over the years. I think I touched on before, my wife came out of hospital with our first child the day before we opened the ice cream farm, so that was challenging. So it's, I guess the work-life balance when you're younger, when you haven't got them ties or responsibilities, is a lot easier. My hardest thing was working with a hangover, so yeah, it wasn't too bad. But when you get older and you've got them other responsibilities, then that's when, and luckily the way this business has gone, and I got married a bit later in life as well, so thankfully I'm hopefully a bit more sensible than what I was. And I've got the business to a scale that I have got people in there that I can trust. Whether it's more luck than judgment, I don't know, that I've got the business to the stage where I can have that time, and I do. And it's uncomfortable. I still find it very uncomfortable not being there, but they are more than capable more capable than me. So that's what I keep on telling myself.
So it's having that management team is what you're saying.
It is, absolutely.
This will run even when you're not there.
Yeah, better. You know, I don't, I think I hold my hands up to that, you know, there's things that are being done now in the business that, you know, I'm a bit too old school, and I have to recognise the fact that they're doing that better.
No, I really appreciate you answering that question. It's important because, you know, we've had a few guests on this podcast who, you know, female guests, and one of the comments I made on a previous episode was how it's easy to ask, you know, younger women, you know, how are you dealing with the work-life balance? And it's something that, you know, we were talking about this unconscious bias idea, weren't we? How, you know, if you had a male leader director who has also got young children, but you probably think, oh, I wouldn't ask them that question because it's not relevant to them. But, you know, clearly it is relevant to you, and I really appreciate you.
No, it is. And I guess for me, it's an uncomfortable question because I do still feel to some extent that I should be there 7 days a week, you know, and so, yeah, I've got to get that straight in my head, really, but, you know, they are, and there is always something, you know. My dad will, because they live just down the road from the farm and I live actually further away, and he'll pick up the phone and say, oh, I've just seen this, what's going on here, and then I get that guilt, oh, I should have been there really, because that shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it isn't going to be looked at or it isn't going to be sorted out. So, yeah, but that's...
Have you reprioritized, if you like, would you say?
I think so, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I guess I'm just lucky that I'm in a situation that I can. You know, I don't, you know, I've got friends that work away from home 4 or 5 days a week, and, you know, I'm very, very lucky, and I don't take that for granted.
Brilliant. It's been such an interesting conversation, this. We ask all of our guests who come on the podcast the same question at the end of the episode, which is around, you know, the title of the podcast is Uncommon Sense. And so we ask the people who come on if they've got any sort of knowledge or experiences that they'd be willing to share with other leaders who might be listening to this that goes against the grain, if you like, or might be uncommon from their own experiences. Is there anything that you'd be willing to share?
I think we've spoken about it. I think if I had to, you know, and you know, thankfully you shared some of the questions, and I thought about this last night, and I think the best answer I've got to that is purpose, you know, and you know, to define your purpose, ensure it's authentic, and instill it throughout your organisation. I think it can help, I would say, the vast majority of businesses, as uncomfortable it might be to go through what could be a minimal you don't have to go through a whole brand strategy workshop, but I do think just to ask them questions, I think is really helpful. But it's not for everybody. So, you know, I'd be careful to say you've got to do it, but I think it's been really helpful for me.
This has been such a brilliant conversation. I'm going to take a lot away from it. I hope our listeners are. I suppose, in particular, the thing that you've spoken about a few times, which I love, which is this idea of creating your own marketplace. I really like that idea. That's what you've done at the ice cream farm. And the other thing that strikes me from our conversation is that you really do know your customers. And at the end of the day, when you're thinking about your purpose and when you're thinking about the direction and strategy of a business and marketing and all that stuff, that's what matters, isn't it, at the end of it? I can say that having been to the ice cream farm many times, I've had a play pass, and we've still got children who are of the age where they go, for anyone who's not been, it really is a place that does make you happy. So it's, you know, it's credit to you, it's a credit to your team. I know that's your purpose. Anyone who's not been, who is in the Northwest, or let's be honest, nationally, I would urge anybody, especially with young children, to seek out the ice cream farm, because it's a brilliant place. It's a great day out. There is a tree that has ice cream growing on it. So it is a place where ice cream really does grow on trees. But I hope you've seen that it's a really interesting story about running a business, about running a family business, about diversifying, and about, you know, changing direction and coming through COVID. So it's been a really, really interesting conversation. Check out the ice cream farm, anyone who's not been there. And all I can say is thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us on Uncommon Sense.
No, you're welcome. No, I've enjoyed it. It's been great.